the heart of sub-Saharan Africa, where commerce meets progress. Welcome to SOUQ News, your source for business, economy, and development insight to drive nations forward. From the vibrant streets of Lagos, Africa's fastest economic hub, SOUQ News takes you on a journey of discovery, analyzing and reporting the facts that lay the foundation for growth and development. We don't just report the news, we create it. SOUQ News is more than a channel. It is a catalyst for change, spotlighting the stories that shape economies, inspire entrepreneurs, and fuel progress. Covering business, finance, technology, energy, and many more, SOUQ News provides a daily deep dive into the stories that matter, interviews with industry titans, and analysis that empowers your understanding of economic landscape. Join us daily as we dissect, discuss, and deliver the most relevant and factual news on business and the economy. SOUQ News is your trusted guide, empowering you with the knowledge to make informed decisions.
My name is Olatunji Shoti Miri. I'm a performing artist and television radio presenter and a university lecturer, Unilag. Keep watching SOUQ News.
Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Black, Africa's finest music comedian, and you're watching SOUQ News. If you're not watching SOUQ News, I pity you, but keep watching SOUQ News.
Hello everyone, my name is Timmy Dakolo, and you're watching SOUQ News. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Wisdom Oluwaseun Okoko, co-founder Orbit Africa Properties. I'm live at SOUQ News. Guys, keep watching SOUQ News for everything that concerns business, economy, politics, news. SOUQ News is your station.
Hello and welcome to SOUQ Pulse. It's your program, and here we look at issues that contain and talk about not just money, things that affect families, things that affect businesses. We look at countries borrowing, giving. We look at businesses across borders. We look at donor agencies, multilateral organizations, and we ask questions. Are they acting in good faith? We look at transactions across continents, Asia, Africa, Europe. We look at what is happening across the seas with one particular line. Who is benefiting in this transaction? What are these policies made for? Are they really affecting the lives positively, negatively? We get people talking, just like we say. Don't stop talking. My name is Chuks. John-Rogers Chuks, and I welcome you to the Friday edition of SOUQ Pulse. I'm not here alone. I am privileged to have our in-house guests and a mentor and a teacher to a whole lot, not just within this climate, not just in Nigeria, but outside Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I welcome our own Mr. Sam. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Chuks. My pleasure to be here.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
It's always an opportunity to have you seated by my side. Today we are looking at this beautiful topic. A child is born, everyone is happy, people celebrate, everyone sends congratulatory messages. Then across local government, the births are put in numbers. Then we'll talk of states, then we'll talk of nations. Then we'll now start saying I'm putting a name to it: population. We are looking at policies that has to do with population in Asia, China to be precise. And we are now looking at time, history. What has the policy on population from China over time? How has it affected them? What's the impact it has made? We'll now compare it to some other countries, Canada, India. Then we'll bring it down to Africa. There is always this major line when it comes to population in Africa. They'll keep asking, is our population a blessing or a curse? At the end of this particular topic today, we'll keep talking. Wherever you choose to pitch your tent, that's good. But we will keep talking. Let's start with a brief on the policy in China. In the late 1970s, the birth rate in China was quite high, 5.6, 5.8. And they were looking for how to bring down that particular numbers because they saw that they were going to hit 1 billion. And by 1978, 79, they hit 1 billion. And now they were very drastic about it. What did they do? They brought up a policy on one parent, one child. And not just the policy, they implemented it to the letter. Yes, there might have been some slacks in some area, majorly rural areas, but they took that very serious. Now, growing up, most of us just got to know that if you are in China, you give birth to one child. It just didn't occur to us that we just thought it was a normal way of life. It was a government policy, but growing up, we saw it as maybe a culture, and that stuck. Fast forward to 2016. They said, okay, we are done with this, but there were issues that came with it. Now, for most people that might not understand, there were consequences of that. Were they able to reduce the high rates in birth rate? Yes, they were, but there were also other consequences. They started having issues of having more male than female. Why? Because people preferred the male child than the female child. So we had a lot of, they could determine their sex thanks to technology, and they will abort the girl child and have the male child. But with time, the population started dwindling, and it was affecting something, and that is where we are going to today, before now start comparing it. At the same time, India was also having the same problem. Population of China, as we speak, is 1.4 billion. That particular nation is producing way more than Africa put together. So, sir, let's open up this discussion. China is telling its people to stop the one child. They have told them a new policy, do 2. Another policy have come out, do 3. Now they are trying to look for another policy to tell you, hey, if you can do more than 3. But it is not happening. Over time, the people have come to acclimatize themselves with me and one child. What do you think they can do to get people to give birth to more children?
All right, thank you very much for that beautiful intro, but I need to take you back a little to 1949, 1950. After the China Revolution, this policy of one child actually took its root when they look at the population projection for China, and the leadership felt that there was going to be a problem at the rate at which fertility was being improved upon at that particular point in time. This policy was now implemented, and there were 2 legs to that policy. We need to understand it. So we're going to relate with Africa later. There were incentive on the one hand, yes, and disincentive on the other hand. Okay. So if you were able to maintain one child policy, there are certain things you benefited from the state. So that incentive was a driver that sustained that policy regime for a very long time. Then came to the 70s, where the implementation was very firm. Then later in the 80s, they felt that there was a disconnect with that policy vis-a-vis the projections they have made. And they thought that we're going to have a problem with aging population. Then the policy was tinkered with, and they moved away to a 2-child policy regime. And in 2016, a new policy framework was put in place to increase to 3 children with high level of incentive rather than the disincentive that drive the former process. So we need to underscore that there are changing dynamics when you look at fertility ratio vis-a-vis aging population and the challenge it has for labor. So China policy over time has changed, where people are being incentivized to produce more children to be able to cater for the Asian population. But if you look at it from the population pyramid, between China and India, they are the highest. And you make a comparison of China and India, possibly to Canada, which shows at about 40 million, with a projection that they will get to about 40-point-something million at the end of 2028.
Okay.
So these are challenges.
Before we get to this, let's still go back to the what's it called? To the China issue. Now, China from 1970s down to 2015. That's well over 40 years. Now, they kept a population, a generation that they've had this within them. I'm growing up. If I get married, if is a child. Now China is now telling them, okay, good, go ahead and give birth to 2 children. I almost said make 2 babies. Good, now give birth to 2 children. Now they are having an issue. They are having a serious problem because people are not following through, even with the incentives. Now you get to see on social media where they will tell you, why should I give birth to 2 children? If you are telling me to give birth to 2 children, that means you are telling the woman to give up on a career and take care of a child, which they are not used to. You are telling the woman to, okay, stay home and make 3 babies. On whose time? That is where they are looking, and they are also voicing this out. What if you, let's say you are China, what will you do to make them follow and adhere to this policy?
No, the policy framework, people have recalibrated their mind towards the one-child policy. So if you look at it from the intergenerational point of view, the population has already acclimatized itself to the one-child policy framework. So their mindset was in line with that one. So for the government to be able to provide additional incentive and change their mindset to increase on the ratio of a childbirth is problematic because they're already used to that system. So if you look at it vis-a-vis their career path and the challenge of raising children, which from an intergenerational point of view, they are already used to having one child. So I think the government is going to review that policy, provide more incentive that will encourage people to do what they call a replacement for childbirth to improve on the trajectory of their population growth to sustain their economic growth and economic development.
Okay, so some years back, just a few years back, Xi Jinping was speaking to the Women Forum, and he was telling them the need for them to encourage their girl children to embrace the family way of life, less hours at work. Then also trying to incentivize the company. How can you make our women stay at home? If they must work, then let them work from home. This is also some of the things they are trying to do. But right now, what more can you think that China can do? Because right now, they are getting to crunch time. They are looking at, just like you said before I stopped you, the population for the first time, instead of going up, this is the second year, is going down. 2 parents over 40 years have produced 1. Now, out of the 1, we still have an issue. They have more male children than female children, which means a lot of males will not get wife to marry. So at this point in time, what do you think that, okay, China, okay, we are Africans, learn this from us. What can you tell them to do?
No, I think what the Chinese government needs to do is to tinker again with our policy framework with a view to adding additional incentive that could possibly motivate citizens to follow the policy to produce more. But when you look at the ratio of male to female, as a result of scientific incentive and understanding, people are able to control the kind of population. So what the government will do as incentive is to find a way to dissuade people from altering their fertility in line with their preference either for male children or that. So I'm sure a regime framework will be provided to encourage a female child to the extent that when you now make female children, you have additional incentive. Maybe that might push the incentive. But the government, that policy where you have to work for shorter hours so that you can find a way to improve on your fertility ratio to add to the population, then government will find a way to even put industrial policy in place in addition to the population policy that will encourage children making to the advantage of the country.
Okay, now we are still dwelling on this particular issue. Now, one thing is very clear: their ability to follow through on the policies, in China to be specific. Now, this particular policy was not just successful, it was over-successful. Now that they are looking for more children, they are trying to add to the population, will you advise them to open their borders to their neighbors if the female think that, yes, Chinese men are a prospect?
Well, there are no restrictions in terms of how relationships are developed across border. So I don't think there should be a policy regime where people are encouraged to open their border because the ratio of the girl child to the boy child is a bit disproportionate to the extent that you want to open your door. But I know as a result of international migration and labor mobility, people will continue to fuse themselves together, and what happened in terms of the outcome of those relationships may to a very large extent help to propel people to make children in China. But a policy framework to open the door may not be advisable at this particular point in time. Okay. But generally speaking, labor mobility is there, that people can import and export labor to certain countries that are deficient in terms of population, particularly the working population, whose average is between age 21 to age 38 in some places. So the idea of labor mobility may help to resolve that challenge, in my view.
Okay, good. The idea of labor mobility will help to resolve this. But now, you know China. You know that part of the country. Hold this thought, because we are going to put it and put them, look at China and some other countries side by side. India also had this issue. They were looking at they projected their own population at that same time. But what they did, they didn't go and tell their people or their citizens to strictly follow a one child or two child. They didn't stipulate any. But what they did was they increased family planning. It was voluntary. They increased it, and they increased information available across board, and that worked for them. Now let's look at it this way. We know China is not as open as the West. We know China is not, thanks to what happened to them over time. Let's now put them side by side to Canada. China has an aging population as we speak, and in their projection, they need a higher workforce because they are getting more industrialized by the day. Canada, on the other side, long time ago, they knew that they also had an aging workforce. And what did they do? They opened up a whole lot of measures in getting foreigners to come. Is it something you think China can adopt?
Like the point I just made earlier in this conversation is that the international labor market.
No, let's be specific with China.
Yes.
Because sometimes they don't follow the international labor market.
No. The point is that there are new relationships. China was closed figuratively at a particular point in time.
Yes.
But with high level of industrialization that has taken place, in addition to technology breakthrough and the gig economy that is enhancing labor, has improved the interface between countries. We know that China is not as open, but to a very large extent, with the Industrial Revolution, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, machine tools, artificial intelligence, plus human interface, and new challenges and the dynamics in the workplace. So this, to a large extent, will shape those decisions in relationship to the aging population. Why they are incentive, and we need to underscore this point, that one-child policy was not just successful because everybody keen to that policy framework. The disincentive for you not to follow that trajectory, the punishment
was harsh.
Is a centralized government system. Once decisions are made at the Central Working Committee in China, then it behoves on the citizens that they must follow through with that regime. But the point I'm making, they may not have an open door policy in terms of inflow of migration, labor migration into China. But then the Industrial Revolution, in addition to machine tools and the gig economy concept where people can work remotely, we help to a very large extent to help China to be able to deal with that challenge in terms of the rate of fertility that has declined over a period of time.
Okay. Now let's look population-wise. China, 1.409 billion as of 2023. India, a little bit more, just by a few million, 1.42 something, same to 2023. And Africa, also very, very close, the entire continent, 1.46 plus. Now, we are looking at one country, not one continent, one country, and their GDP is more than ours, more than one continent. And the population is a little, we are more, just a little. Now let's look at this other side. Don't get angry, but I'm going to get there. Is our population a cause?
It is not at all. The population, to a very large extent, even China and India, that population has been a blessing in terms of the market and the labor that was available to those places. So
thank you.
Therefore,
hold on. Our population is not a cause, but it has been a blessing to China, to India, to Canada, to USA, to Australia, to the UK. Let me not forget, to the entire West. Why is it not a blessing to us?
I said it's a blessing.
To us?
Yes.
How?
The point is that you look at it based on the fact that the African states, the 54 countries that make Africa, have not come to terms with themselves in terms of opening themselves for the abundant resources and the fluid population that we have.
What is holding them?
We are saying that there's a problem with the global architecture.
A lot of times we mention the global architecture.
Yes, it's a challenge.
Can we go through this route? Yeah. Now, when Nigerians, Africans leave the shores of Africa and land in UK, give them 2-3 years. They are well employed somewhere, working hard somewhere. NHIS, high majority Africans. If we go to the US, the same thing, the health sector, high majority Africans. Tech, same thing, high majority Africans. They are doing well and doing excellently well. They are leading companies. Innovation, they are in front. That same population that is here, what is wrong?
That is a problem.
Are they different? Is it just different people?
No, they are different people.
So what is wrong?
You must understand that colonial boundaries that were drawn up, number one, we're not justifying that They have left some country over 60-something years, some 30-something years ago. But that division still exists. Number two, the policy framework does not support inter-trade, intra-African trade, intra-African market development, and the rest.
Whose policy framework?
African policy framework, which is the pillage that the West has done to Africa. And they instigate conflicts around Africa, which are detrimental to the development of Africa. So, but the point here is that we cannot really dwell on that challenge. But the leadership and the people as a collective must wake up to this responsibility in terms of innovation, in terms of creativity, in terms of knowledge and skill. Africans have those skills. Why is it that when they live here, the best and the brightest move into other countries? They become the best, and they are able to push forward those environments. Therefore, what is wrong here is that we need to tinker with the policy framework and find a way to pull these colonial lenses that has blurred our development effort so that we can take advantage of this huge population of over 1.4 billion people. And there's a framework in place already to open up Africa to trade among themselves. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement is a policy framework that will help
Africa. Policy framework on paper or policy framework that is being practiced?
But we need to practice it. Some countries are pushing it.
It's still on paper?
Yes, but we are saying that the question you ask is that why is it that when people migrate from Africa, they do well and they contribute to the development of those countries where they migrate to? But I'm saying that the environment here is not conducive, and we need to pull down those shackles.
Who makes an environment conducive? Human beings.
Of course.
The populace.
Yes.
China made their own environment
the point
conducive.
I'm making as a people,
good.
And as a government,
is our responsibility
to make our environment to be conducive.
So what is
that we
holding
can
us?
tap. But then some of those challenges are put forward earlier to you in this conversation, that the government needs to be deliberate, the policy framework that are in place must be encouraged, and the best and the brightest within Africa must only be encouraged so that we can retain knowledge, abilities, and the skill set that is domiciled with us in Africa.
Okay. On this bit, just hold your thought because we're coming back. We need to go on a break so that we'll cool off a bit. SOUQ Pulse will be right back. Hey, don't go anywhere.
Broad Street. Broad Street, situated in Lagos Island, is steeped in Nigerian history. Once the biggest financial hub of the country, it housed the headquarters of major banks, linked the CBN, the stock exchange, and the loads of lender companies. Broad Street is a historically significant street. It has played a central role in the development of Lagos and history, an important commercial and administrative center for the British colonial authorities. It was also a home to some of the city's earliest modern buildings. Broad Street was a residential area in the pre-colonial era. With the British came the Methodist Boys High School in 1878 and the Broad Street Prison in 1882, renamed Freedom Park. The General Hospital, which was a British military hospital, was built in 1893, being the first general hospital in Nigeria. The old British Secretariat building, which is now the Federal Ministry of Justice, was built in 1906. Broad Street has seen a full turn into modern commercial office blocks, complexes, skyscrapers, and markets from the Outer Marina through Akpombo, early into the Adeniji Adele Road. Broad Street is one of the busiest streets in Nigeria on weekdays, where commercial activities take place day and night. From modern buildings to ancient structures, this street gives one a raw dose of life in Lagos. Broad Street is often referred to as Lagos Financial District. It boasts a mix of architectural styles, reflecting its long history, colonial-era buildings, Victorian and Edwardian architectural features, alongside more modern skyscrapers and structures. Broad Street remains a vital, vibrant part of the Nigerian economy. Broad Street. SOUQ Enlightenment.
The Three Wise Men. Iconic sculptures and statues adorn major metropolitan cities of the world. Idumota Market. Eko Idumota, once a residential neighborhood, is home to Idumota Market located on Lagos Island. It is one of the oldest and arguably one of the largest markets in West Africa. Idumota is a historic neighborhood adjacent to the Lagos port that facilitated the slave trade, and later, under the British indirect rule, it surrounded to exports that fueled the colonial enterprise. Idumota was also the location of an Armed Forces Remembrance Cenotaph called Soja Idumota, built as a monument to Nigerian soldiers who served with the West African Frontier Force. An Eyo Masquerade statue and a clock tower are also some monuments at Idumota. Idumota Market is so popular that large sales are recorded as early as 7 a.m. The market is made up of hundreds of locked-up shops occupying several multi-story buildings, with some measuring about 5 or more floors. In 2010, the Lagos State government demolished some illegal structures in order to improve vehicular and human movement in and around the markets. During weekdays, the neighborhood of Idumota is densely populated by shoppers, traders, and bus passengers. From the Carter Bridge ascending into Lagos Island, passengers can see the neighborhood before disembarking at their final destination. Idumota Market accommodates the substantial inflow of imported goods. The bulk of import from abroad are routed first through Idumota and then on to other markets through Nigeria and other West and Central African countries. The energy of private Idumota traders and wholesalers facilitate this activity, where millions of US dollars worth of wholesale is exchanged daily. Idumota Market, SOUQ Enlightenment.
Welcome back to SOUQ Pulse. We are here and we are looking at policy on population as it concerns China. Then we are now putting it aside and comparing it to Africa, Canada, and some other countries. But our focus and our like is Africa. That's what we are going to right now. For some of you that really didn't really get it, please just sit and let's talk. So, sir, when it comes to population, if we look at Canada, if we look at China, they use their population data for projection, for budgeting, and most importantly, for planning productivity. If I'm wrong, just nod your head. If I'm still wrong, let me keep going. But let's now compare it to what we use that same population for. If we keep the data in the first place, now let's use Nigeria for example. We have heard that we are 200 million and above. That particular narrative has been there for a very long time. So now, for the population census that have been done, we are not sure or know when the next one is going to be. Now let's look at the way numbers came. Where you have more people, population-wise, you are supposed to have more productivity coming from there. African population has majorly been based on one, revenue sharing, and not productivity. How can we start looking ourselves in the face and tell ourselves the truth? If you say you are more, show us what you are producing.
Okay, if you look at the politics of census, I think it's beyond this discourse. But
is census now politics?
Yeah, because even Nigeria, if you look at the elections.
No, before we get to elections, because we are coming there.
No.
Is census now politics?
There's a politics, particularly in Nigeria. There are politics with numbers.
Okay.
And you underscore the importance of revenue sharing. So that gives you...
In the first place, should our population be
that is not the
about
basis.
Revenue sharing?
No. I'm trying to underscore the point so that I can advance this conversation.
Okay.
You made a point that should population in Nigeria, we're specific to Nigerian, be used as a revenue sharing mechanics. And I'm saying that is a major challenge, and that's why I brought a political dimension to census, where census is used as politics to negotiate resource, becomes a major challenge. Rather than focusing on the strength of your population to enhance productivity, creativity, and innovation, like those countries that we just mentioned earlier. So we need to remove politics from census, from counting people in Nigeria, so that we can look at the greater benefit of the population. There are other issues in addition to our census. Even in the colonial time, up to the early 1960s, there were issues where figures were falsified, where animals were...
All because of politics?
Oh yeah, the politics of...
politics of numbers?
Yeah, politics of number.
Okay.
But we're saying, now, for us to take advantage...
We are not going there. We are looking at it as, this is what it is in a lot of African countries. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is what it is. Now, we are focused on production. If it's not production, then we are not talking SOUQ PULSE. If Africa is not moving forward, then we are not talking SOUQ PULSE. So whatever is stopping production, we will call you out. If our politics is based on politics of, if our population census is based on politics of numbers, at what point in time would the people say, okay, good, no problem. You people are more, we agree. Count cow, count goat, count sheep, count house. No problem, we agree. Produce more. That is what it should be. If you are more, then produce more. So what is stopping us from saying, okay, good, you are more, produce more?
No, it's a government issue to the fact that, okay, if you disaggregate your population in terms of the local factor endowment, then that should enhance national productivity.
So before we start talking about national productivity, okay, this is what I'm saying. If we split this circle into 4, have A, B, C, D, and D is saying where we are 10,000, A is saying where we are 5,000. Let us demand, you that you are 10,000, produce more. That's no problem. Let us have more output of product from that particular place that is more.
But I don't think that scientifically, in terms of ratio of population to productivity, yet to a very large extent in terms of market, what are the endowments within those the quadrant that you just created? There are some of those quadrants that may not naturally be productive because the other variables and factors that can enhance productivity, even within the population.
Let's look at it in 2 ways. We have demand and supply. If they can't produce more, then they should buy more.
But I don't want to go into those arguments.
It's 2 ways. If they can't produce more, then they should buy more.
So what is important, let's just see how we deploy our population to enhance productivity. The politics of the number, I'm not really interested in discussing that.
But
that leadership,
it's not helping us.
Yeah, leadership, and as a collective, we must find a way to take advantage of the large population, take advantage of the market. People are coming here to do manufacturing, to do service. That means the market is there. So why is it that it's difficult for us, even as nationals, to even invest in our own environment? Why people from other places see these potentials and business opportunity and they are investing here? So there's a disconnect between our value proposition as a people and the population that we have. Therefore, we must improve on the way we engage the population. And that again has to do with policy framework. And the policies of revenue sharing, who gets what, should stop. Rather, what is a market that is available for us to exploit as a people?
What do we bring to the market?
We have the market.
I'm following you saying, what our population, what is our population bringing to the market?
So let's develop the human capital as well, so that we can export part of this population to where aging population is a major challenge in terms of development. So we can export human capital which we equally have in abundance.
Okay, but
they already been.
Let's look at it from this angle. There was this particular question that came out yesterday, and I guess you must have watched the program, that of the last episode, and you took this down. Now, if we are looking at it from the perspective of being able to use not just the human capital, but being able to export the human capital and earn directly for government, not just individuals on their own, being able to have the record of who is living, where is he living to, and be able to account for this particular set of movements.
The government is a facilitator.
Good. And the
for
government
labor migration.
Okay.
So when you facilitate, in terms of documentation processes and the way people move from one country to the other, the government is an indirect beneficiary of that human capital export. How? For example, if you have human capital that is moving from Nigeria to another place, they are going to buy local tickets, and there are taxes that will be paid to those service provider.
Okay.
Your passport regime, you need a Nigerian passport to be able to travel elsewhere. So the government will make money. So, but then within the purview of individual human capacity, once they go, what you call diaspora remittances will come back into the country that is beneficial, because they come through the banking financial services sector. And the bank, to a very large extent, will take advantage.
For those that come through the banking
No,
sector.
they mostly come through the banking transaction. And that's why the government in 1994, 95, up to 97, even up to early part of 1998, under the leadership of the former Minister of Finance, Chief Michael Ani, who encouraged the domiciliary account framework that allow people to transfer their hard-earned currency to their families, even for themselves, who have dorm accounts, so that the money can come in terms of dollar that will help to reflect the local economy and people can benefit, and that will show up the forex exchange regime. But in that policy framework, how the Central Bank of Nigeria bastardized that policy remain a different question entirely. So migration in terms of labor and in terms of benefit to Nigeria is not that the government must put a percentage. The agencies of government as a facilitator, will equally earn money where labor is exported from Nigeria, and by extension, a greater majority African country can equally benefit from that regime.
Okay. Now let's go back to China, the one child policy. Now during that particular period of the one child policy, some parents that gave birth to more than one had issues because there were stringent rules on that. Some of those kids they didn't have access to education because you needed to, in some areas, majorly in the urban cities, you had to hide them. And a large number of them did not have access to education. Those that did had to do it through an indirect means. Now we have, after a period of time, we had a population of Chinese citizens that were not schooled, thanks to that policy. These are some wrongs of that particular policy. Now let's bring that back to this place. We don't have issues with how many children you should give birth to, or who should give birth to kids. But we see a lot of families, both states, majorly in the north, where people give birth to children they cannot cater for. We see it everywhere, here in Nigeria, down to our neighboring countries in Niger, in Chad, the northern part of West Africa. We see this happen a lot. Even in some eastern states. What can government do to, be it an assistance or to mandate parents or whoever is giving birth to a child, if you can't send this child to a primary school, which in most states are free, then something should be done. What can we do?
Okay, the challenge when it comes to fertility in terms of childbirth, you've mentioned some geopolitical zone within Nigeria and Africa in particular. There are issues of culture and religion. A religion that encourages people to have more than one wife. If you look at an average ratio of, even if you use the China policy regime, to some of this culture you talk about, when you have an average children of 3 and somebody is married to 4 wives. So it's just 4 wives times 3 children, then one average family will have that. So
average family giving birth to 12
children. And that is the case.
Whose responsibility?
Is the responsibility of the state.
Why
to a very large
why
extent,
should it be the responsibility of the state?
To provide the first basic education, which is a human right.
Good. Now, whose responsibility to get those children to, that,
the point
to access
here,
that opportunity?
If you want to scale up the fertility or to reduce the fertility in those areas, first you have to deal with the cultural norms and religious norms and practices of those areas. So if the government can educate, which happened in China, because there was a high level of education, why this policy must be implemented. And those incentives were provided to drive the process. So if you want the average person that is driven by cultural imperative in deciding the number of children they want to have, then you have to deal with the issue of culture and religion. How do you do this? You provide some incentives that if you maintain this ratio of children, this is what you get. And that's what happened in China, why they were able to sustain that policy framework for a long time. People did not really like it. Then, in addition to that, these religious practices equally make it difficult to imbibe family planning mechanism that will reduce childbirth. They are equally religious practices when you talk about abortion. So, until you deal with these cultural issues or religious issues, then it's going to be a problem to be able to manage the number of people. And that's what happened in India too, because some part of India, there are predominantly some religious sects that believe in the same concept that you talked about earlier. So the government needs to put up a policy regime, a high level of incentive, taking lessons from the policy in India to have sustainable for over 43 years, that there was a level of consistency. By the way, some of the things you mentioned, that population something, when those people that had disincentive in the city, it improved on urban-rural migration. Those who could not sustain those policy regime, they allowed their children to move to their rural communities, to take technical educations. They were living with some grandparents that were no longer in the productive, so they equally had, there are some research findings that underscore that understanding, where that at the peak of that regime, where they couldn't have that incentive that was promised by the state, they were urban-rural migration, not rural-urban migration, people moving from cities to rural area, and that to a very large extent brought about equilibrium in the population pyramid of China at that particular point in time.
Wow, thank you very much, Mr. Sam. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure having you. Now let's look at this same issue of when we say population, and look, we always look first at the children because they are the ones that own tomorrow. If we can't make today better for them, then we are having a problem tomorrow. This particular policy, that was what they saw. Now let's look at this and call it what it is. Out of school children. How can Africa start dealing with out of school children? Majorly primary and first 3 years of the high school education. How can we deal with that?
The out of school children figure is alarming in Africa. But then the challenge for me is that the government is not responsive enough, because the education policy on a constitutional basis provide for children to certain level of the basic education. So the government has not been, and the Child Right Act, which has been domesticated in Nigeria, provide that framework that children within those age must get education. But most state governments, local government, that has the core responsibility for primary education, don't live to the responsibility in terms of teachers' pupil ratio. So the government needs to invest more so that we can take a greater number of the out-of-school children, which is alarming. UNESCO in Nigeria put the figure at about 11 point something. The figures are between 12 point something to 15 million out-of-school children, and that is very dangerous. And when you look at it from the perspective of the drivers of conflict, the overlapping driver of conflict, once people don't have proper education, the surest way is that they find a way in criminality. And that again has an impact on the state. And that's one of the reasons why we have high level of insecurity. So we need to find a way to sustain basic education so that once that education is provided, people can find a way to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. So education is actually an enabler and a driver for greater productivity. So government need to focus more.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sam. I am happy you were here on this beautiful Friday edition of SOUQ PULSE, and I'm looking forward to having you again on this particular set. It's SOUQ PULSE, and today we've looked at policies on population on China. We looked at the history from their one-child policy to what they are having right now. We looked at a bit on Canada and their open borders through some specific means, getting skilled workers all over the place and getting them to help them fill up the gaps of the workforce with their aging population. And it still continues, increasing it every year. Then we're coming back home to Africa and asking ourselves questions. We must get better. We're not saying we need to get better. We must get productive. If we say we are dealing with a population of over 1.4 billion, how are we educating those younger ones? Because tomorrow, if we don't take care of them, negatively, they will take care of us. So let's look at the future. Let's look at what is right. Let's look at what is positive. And remember, don't ever stop talking. Let's better Africa. Let's keep working and let's get productive. It's SOUQ Sport, and I'm wishing you a very beautiful weekend. We'll see you on Monday. SOUQ PULSE. Bye.
Sub-Saharan Africa, where commerce meets progress. Welcome to SOUQ News, your source for business, economy, and development insight to drive nations forward. From the vibrant streets of Lagos, Africa's fastest economic hub, SOUQ News takes you on a journey of discovery, analyzing and reporting the facts that lay the foundation for growth and development. We don't just report the news, we create it. SOUQ News is more than a channel. It is a catalyst for change, spotlighting the stories that shape economies, inspire entrepreneurs, and fuel progress. Covering business, finance, technology, energy, and many more, SOUQ News provides a daily deep dive into the stories that matter, interviews with industry titans, and analysis that empowers your understanding of economic landscape. Join us daily as we dissect, discuss, and deliver the most relevant and factual news on business and the economy. SOUQ News is your trusted guide, empowering you with the knowledge to make informed decisions.